Our HOA president, Linda, believed she could intimidate me into compliance. I installed an expensive set of solar panels on my roof to cut down my electricity costs, but she ordered me to remove them because she claimed they were ugly and ruined the neighborhood's appearance. It cost me thousands of dollars, and she laughed while enforcing it. She assumed I would surrender and move on, but she overlooked one critical fact. I am an optical engineer. My entire profession revolves around controlling light, angles, and reflection. I studied the HOA rule book and uncovered a loophole that changed everything. I removed the panels from my roof, just like she demanded, but I installed new ones in my backyard. And these were not ordinary solar panels. They were advanced reflective mirrors. And instead of pointing them at the sky, I aimed them directly at Linda's living room window. Today, at exactly 2 p.m., when the sun reaches a perfect position, her house is going to feel like a microwave oven. Let's see how she enjoys the heat. My name is Alex. I'm a man driven by logic. I'm an engineer. When I face a problem, I analyze it and design the most efficient solution. Recently, electricity prices in our state skyrocketed. My monthly power bill became more expensive than my car payment, so I did what made sense. I invested my life savings into a high-end solar power system. I had 20 high-efficiency panels installed on the south-facing slope of my roof. It was a massive financial commitment, but I was proud. I was on my way to becoming energy independent. 2 days after the installation, someone knocked on my door. It was Linda, the HOA president and self-appointed ruler of the cul-de-sac. She held a clipboard and wore a look of pure disgust. "Alex," she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at my roof, "take those black glass shards down." I blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me? Those are solar panels. They're going to save me thousands of dollars." She didn't hesitate. "I don't care," she replied coldly. "They're hideous. They clash with the classic colonial aesthetic of our community." She flipped through her clipboard. Under HOA Bylaw Section 9, no roof structures are permitted if they're visible from the street and considered unsightly by the board. You have 48 hours to remove them, or I'll fine you $100 per day. I tried to reason with her. I showed her my power bills. I talked about sustainability and the environment. She just smiled that thin, cruel smile. "Rules are rules, Alex. Read the book." I had no choice. I paid a crew to come back and rip the system off my roof. I lost the installation fees. I lost the removal fees. And I went right back to paying outrageous electricity bills. Linda had won, or so she thought. I was furious. But engineers don't destroy things when they're angry. They redesign them. I pulled out the 300-page HOA Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions book. I spent 3 sleepless nights reading every single line. Then, on page 142, I found it, the golden ticket. Section 9 did indeed prohibit unsightly roof structures. But Section 14b, covering landscaping and garden structures, had a glaring oversight. It stated that residents were allowed to install garden ornamentation or solar devices in their backyard, as long as they were ground-mounted and did not exceed 8 feet in height. And here was the key detail. The rule never mentioned the angle of the devices. It also never specified the material. A wicked idea took shape in my mind. Linda said my panels were ugly because they were black and absorbed light. I thought, fine, Linda, I won't absorb the light. I'll give every bit of it to you. I didn't reinstall my old panels. Instead, I went to an industrial hardware supplier and bought 4 massive sheets of mirror-finish aluminum. These weren't just shiny. They were nearly perfect reflectors. I built 4 wooden frames in my backyard, each exactly 7 feet 11 inches tall, 1 inch below the legal limit. I mounted the polished metal sheets onto the frames. Then came the most important part, targeting. I used a laser level and a solar path chart. I calculated the sun's trajectory for the summer months. I determined that between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m., the sun would sit perfectly behind my house. I angled all 4 reflectors with mathematical precision. I didn't aim them upward to collect power. I aimed them directly at the west-facing wall of Linda's house. More specifically, I targeted her large living room picture window where she watched TV every afternoon, along with a vinyl siding covering her home. Vinyl siding is cheap plastic. Its melting point is around 165 degrees Fahrenheit. What I had built was essentially a solar concentrator. I planned to take 400 square feet of sunlight and focus it into a single scorching beam. The next day, the forecast called for clear skies and 95-degree heat. I sat on my back porch holding an industrial infrared thermometer gun, waiting. At 1:30 p.m., the sun shifted into position. My garden mirrors caught the light. They didn't just reflect it, they intensified it. A blinding, white-hot beam shot across the fence and slammed into the side of Linda's house. The result was immediate. I aimed the thermometer at her wall. The reading climbed rapidly. 100 degrees, 130, 165, 180. The vinyl siding couldn't handle the thermal shock. It softened, then it sagged. Within minutes, it looked like melting wax, twisting, warping, and smoking. Inside her home, Linda's air conditioner was useless. The concentrated sunlight poured through her window, turning her living room into a greenhouse on the surface of the sun. Suddenly, her back door burst open. Linda stumbled outside, red-faced, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. She stared at her house and screamed, "Fire! Help!" She called both the fire department and the police. When officers arrived, she pointed a trembling finger at my backyard. "He's attacking my house," she yelled. "He's burning it with lasers." One officer walked over to my fence. I stood there calmly, holding the HOA rule book. "Officer," I said, "these are garden art installations. They're ground-mounted and under 8 feet tall. I'm in full compliance with HOA Bylaw 14B. I can't control how bright the sun is today." He looked at the warped siding. He looked at the rule book. He tried very hard not to laugh. "Ma'am," the officer said to Linda, "technically he hasn't broken any laws. This is a civil issue involving reflected light, and it follows your HOA's own rules." The conclusion was simple. Linda had to replace the entire west side of her home. The repairs cost her over $15,000. For weeks, her house looked like a melted candle. The very next day, I received a letter from the HOA board. They agreed to let me reinstall my rooftop solar panels on one condition. The garden mirrors had to go. I accepted immediately. My panels are back on the roof. My electric bill is $0. And Linda now keeps her blinds closed 24 hours a day, terrified of the sun. She learned a valuable lesson. Never challenge an engineer to a battle of intelligence, or he might just harness the power of the sun against you. If you enjoyed the scientific revenge, smash that like button until it melts and subscribe. Because in the next video, we expose an HOA president who tried to tow my